Hey everybody, Sean Francis here. As these podcasts keep going on, hopefully I get better at them. I'm noticing some restrictions within myself and some things I need to work on, and some judgy negative thoughts that are coming from rewatching these. I feel like my brain just goes really fast when I'm trying to have this conversation. Maybe I got to be a better listener. That might be it. Anyways, this week we talk with Dr. I don't know if she's a doctor. I keep saying doctor, but I don't think I'm having a conversation with Judith Rush. She is the director of mentor externship in the University St. Thomas School of Law. And she blew my mind a few years ago when she was talking about how law students and the law profession as a whole has a huge mental health problem that I was unaware of, because they always look so calm, cool, and collect, when they're presenting. Or maybe that's just TV. Maybe they're not all like that. But I haven't been in court too many times. So maybe my view of the law world is very skewed. Hopefully I don't end up in court for whatever reason. Anyways, she explained to me how addiction, suicide, mental health, all of these types of things to cope with the stress of being in law and in this profession is extremely damaging for a lot of kids, and not just kids, but people in general, and how the statistics are just not good for people in this profession. And so we had a great conversation, and it all started a few years ago when my mom and I went to the School of Law of St. Thomas, and we brought puppies and pigs to try and cheer up the students. And that's where I met Judith, and she just told me that this was the first time she saw these students smile in months, just because of the school load, the competition between students, and how difficult it is to pass the bar, and amongst other things. And we had a delightful conversation about all of these things and what they're doing at this University of St. Thomas to kind of combat these things that the students are going through. So another layer peeled back on mental health. As I've said a million times, mental health is a skeleton that's in everyone's closet, and the more people and the more closets we open, the more we can see the full capacity of what mental health is. I keep saying it's mental health, but it's kind of like a mental illness, or these barriers. What these barriers are doing to us as a whole. So it is with my further ado to present Judith Rush. One Whole Life with Sean Francis. If you're cool, I'd like to start with how we met. Which is kind of funny, because it was over a potbelly pig, if I remember correctly. My mom brought some puppies and Hamilton, our potbelly pig, to St. Thomas Law, and what pops out, the story that always pops into my head is we lost Hamilton for 5 to 10 minutes. We didn't know where this little potbelly pig went, and then we found him behind a table eating all the leftover pizza that was for the law students, which. I like that memory a lot. But what I also remember, the second part, is how you were telling me this was the first time you've seen these law students smile, maybe in the whole semester, just playing with these puppies and pigs. And so if you could, can you talk or explain why we had pigs and puppies at the law school?
Sure. So we had pigs, puppies, and pizza. Importantly. Yes. Yeah. And Hamilton appreciated that.
Right.
But you came in at a great time. You came in during Wellness Week. And that's an opportunity for our Wellness and Practice group to put on activities all week that highlight wellness and just are plain fun, to get students kind of out of their shells. And it's part of there's a national movement in lawyer assistants, law student assistants in particular, to have a law student mental health day that happens every year in October. But we here at St. Thomas, as long as we've had a student organization called Wellness and Practice, we've put together a whole week of activities just to get students engaged. Being in a law school where we have students who are their first year, second year, and third year students, the first year students tend to be around the building all the time. The upper level students pretty quickly figure out a way not to be around here, at least on Fridays. This has all changed, of course, under the pandemic, but the idea was by having a whole week's worth of activities, everyone would have an opportunity to engage, regardless of level, regardless of their schedules, because it's important. Law students are serious folks. I mean, they spend a lot of time, studying and being in class where they're essentially performing in a way. I mean, they're always feeling like they're on, and they need to be on top of their stuff. And so it's hard for them to give themselves permission to just have fun.
So what's the difference between just like a normal, because I looked in your background, you taught at Hamlin for a few years, and then you had your own practice. You seem to have your fingers in just about everything law when I looked at it. And so what's the difference between like a law student versus just an everyday ordinary student, like the stresses that they go through that are different than somebody, maybe in a business program?
Okay. Well, first of all, I think all of our students come in, they're very high functioning people. They are very accomplished. So, I think in any given setting, whether it's high school or college or most settings other than maybe, law school and med school, you just have a great variety of people from all different backgrounds and varying levels of, grades, right? And being exceptional, like our law students are, very accomplished, they come in having been at the top of the class throughout their, who knows, from kindergarten on. And it's part of their identity. I mean, they're used to being able to get stuff, they get it quick. They don't necessarily make a big deal of it, but they are the overachievers. They're out there leading student organizations, even in high school and college. And so they come here and they are now in the same setting as all of the other high achievers. Basically our law students are all from the top of their classes, and they come in, and law school is the first time that they're actually feeling like they might not be at the top of the class, and they're worried about it. And I think they get over, there's just something that happens when you come to law school. You start to hear these myths, and they're very widely held beliefs, but they are myths about what you need to do to be successful as a lawyer, what you need to do to get a job, to get the job you want, even if it isn't the job you thought you want when you showed up here. And it has a way of truly kind of changing your life's map when you're here in law school, in a way that I think doesn't happen in other settings. So one of the things that happens is you're here to learn to think like a lawyer. And that process involves a pretty intense classroom experience where you're called upon to recite, to express, to indicate your knowledge of what you read, to respond to the professor's questions in a way that you just haven't ever experienced before. And so, that has a result on a student's self-esteem. It makes them wonder. Many times, I can't tell you how many students over time have told me, they really thought they're the only ones in the room that don't know the answer. But the reality is that none of them know the answer because they haven't gone to law school before. And they're not used to thinking, using this doctrinal approach and separating out what they think and feel from what they're learning. So it's an experience that can be very jarring for many students. It feels very competitive. I think St. Thomas has an environment. As you mentioned, I've been at Hamlin, I taught at Hamlin, I taught at Mitchell, which are now combined. And I've been here, and our environment is different. It's a whole lot more collegial and supportive. When students have difficulty, a death in the family or a medical thing or whatever it is, our students are very supportive of each other, and tend not to be quite as cutthroat as in other places. Not necessarily, of course, we're all Minnesota nice here.
Right.
But even at Hamlin or at Mitchell, you'd hear about competitive activities like people cutting. This is old school.
Yeah.
But back in the day, we had these things called books that you had to open up, and there were case books, and there were cases in there, and all of the students were doing legal writing. In legal writing, had to find these cases and use these cases. Well, people would cut the case out of the book. I mean,
wow.
That's a kind of and you don't really see that sort of behavior as much, but it's undeniably a very jarring, stressful, anxiety-producing experience.
Is this like
a law student?
Is this? So what makes it competitive? Is there only a certain number of spots? Like I know, I was at NDSU, and the nursing program only had a certain amount of spots you could move on to the next phase. Is that what happens there too, or is it based on just internal? I need to be perfect, the best. Like is it both?
Well, there's a message that you get as a law student that says you need to have these high grades, because you need to have high grades in order to get jobs in the big firms. And very soon students start to believe that the big firm is the only trajectory, and that's the trajectory where the good lawyers go. And you want to be one of those good lawyers. And I know I'm overstating it a little bit, but there's a level. I mean, the levels of stress that law students experience is not, it's like 3 times by the time they leave law school. The levels of depression are 3 times that of the general population.
Yeah, maybe that's a good. I had this in my question. She's like, what are the stats for law students versus like the general population? I don't know if you have those on hand or not, but
well, sort of just super generally, because there's definitely studies out there, and I'm not a numbers gal, but generally it's about 8% of the population suffers from chemical misuse, is what they call it, addiction. Chemical addiction, essentially. And lawyers are 2 to 3 times that, have always been 2 to 3 times that in terms of both addiction as well as depression. And I think the depression rates are similar too. So we have 8%, and then we have, 24% in the profession. And, there was an assumption that probably carried over to law students as well, because if you're 8% in the population, but you're a lawyer, and you're suffering at 24% of lawyers are suffering, where does that happen? And it happens in law school. And there was one study where they actually could see 8% to 16% to 24% between 1L year and 3L year. And then eventually it kind of dropped off a little bit. But still, as lawyers, we're not very well. But then there was actually a study that was done by one of our professors here, along with others, 2 others around the country, and they found that 53% of students drank enough to get drunk in the 30 days prior to the survey. So 53% of students drank enough to get drunk within the month before. I mean, that's a pretty high percentage, and and that's probably not too much different than the undergrad number. 14% used prescription drugs without a prescription in the prior 12 months, which is not only indicative of the felt need to do that, but also that they're willing to engage in, break the law to do that.
Yeah.
17% screened positive for depression, 37%, and this was much higher than I think had been anticipated. 37% screened for anxiety. I mean, that 14% severe anxiety. And those who work in law schools know that the anxiety levels are high. I mean, we're not out diagnosing, anxiety,
Right.
but you see it. I mean, these students definitely are incredibly anxious. And then, you have these high levels of stress, high levels of anxiety. We have some coping, alcohol used as sort of the way to relax, unless students realize that there's others. But then you have 63% of students are reluctant to report their concerns about their own chemical or mental health, or concerns about others. And so there's a fear of taking care of each other, sort of reporting a colleague because you have concerns, and there's fear about reporting yourself to get the help that you need because you're worried that you might not get into the bar. And that's another myth, because bar examiners in Minnesota and pretty consistently around the country say they want lawyers who are healthy, who've taken care of themselves, and where they see students who have conduct that's of concern, like the DWIs and other things that indicate that they might have a problem and they've not addressed it. Those are the folks who are not as likely, are likely to be held up a little bit in the process until they can get the help they need.
Right.
And so bar examiners encourage students to get the help they need, but there's still some, students are suspicious that, that's not, that they say that, but they don't mean that. And one of the reasons for that, and I know I'm just going on and I'm going to
I'm fascinated.
Is that Minnesota and most other states have questions that ask about certain mental health conditions. And even if, they're not asking about mild depression, or they're not, they're actually asking about, conduct that that resulted, or they're asking the student to say, have you been impaired to the extent that you wouldn't have met the qualifying criteria?
I would imagine these are all anonymous too then, or
no,
or not. No, they're not.
These are
Okay.
At the end of your 3 years of law school, where you're learning to think like a lawyer and learning the skills and habits of a good lawyer. At the end of that, you're going to have a bar exam that you need to pass if you want to practice law.
Right.
And as part of that process, you need to fill out this application that discloses conduct that, so they ask about illegal conduct and those sorts of things. But most states also have a question that asks about certain mental health conditions. And the fact that they still have those in their bar exam application questions are, they can say whatever they want about, we want you to get the help you need, but there's some distrust there. And so there's a movement in the country right now. I think we have 3 states that eliminated the mental health questions from their bar application process. And there's a movement to try to make that happen around the country so that the focus is on conduct that is of concern, and not on a condition. Both because you can't focus on a condition under the ADA, and because it makes sense to encourage law students who need help to get the help they need, and not to keep pushing that down, saying, okay, I'm stressed right now because I'm in law school, but as soon as I get through this bar exam, I'll be fine.
But that can't be how it works, though, right? Like, because I would imagine trying to get a job and they find out you were seeing a therapist, that would make, and I'm not a lawyer in law school, but I would think that would make someone nervous about that maybe getting out, that maybe their mental health is at, or their mental capacity is at jeopardy, if it's looked at that way, or does that not exist?
Well, I don't. Luckily, it's not that bad.
Okay,
I think
good.
what law students fear are bar examiners who are going to maybe hold them up because they've disclosed that they've gotten treatment.
Okay.
Right? Or hold them up because they've, because they've disclosed that they have one of these very serious mental health conditions that did impact them in a way that if they had been practicing law, they wouldn't have been able to take care of their clients at the time, right?
Yeah.
So that's the fear. But the reality of lawyers, because lawyers don't do much better in terms of
I was going to say
getting the help that they need. Is not it? There is definitely a component of other people knowing about it. There's stigma. There's stigma.
That's why I wanted to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, and so fighting stigma is important. But in the practice of law, what we've seen is, let's say a lawyer is sort of medicating using alcohol to address some other issues, or just has some mental health issues that are just not being effectively treated, and the significant other of that lawyer knows it and sees it. Mm-hmm. But the lawyer fears what's going to happen in employment, right? They need that job.
Right.
The significant other fears for the same reason. They worry about professional ramifications, people not understanding, losing jobs, possibly, professional responsibility ramifications, mm-hmm. even though, again, there's every incentive to get the help that you need so that you can be competent, right. And so you can competently represent clients. But there's just that fear of sort of being, the stigma of, having a health condition that happens to be, mental health or chemical health related.
Right. This might, just going back a little bit, is the type of person that has these anxiety, depression, high excellence, do they become lawyers, or is that a symptom of being a student in the law profession, or is that just a yin and yang kind of a thing? Like it could be both.
Well, I think sometimes, sometimes you'd find that students who did just fine, maybe they had some mental health concerns, some depression or something when they were in undergrad, and sometimes just the pressure cooker that is law school, right. Just brings it to a different level, because I think there's again, kind of coming back to the fact that this environment can feel very competitive. You learn early on that you probably don't want to show your underbelly, right?
Right. Yeah, who
and
does?
You learn right away that
Scary.
The answer to the question, "How are you doing?" is, "I'm good."
Especially in Minnesota.
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good. Because it's it can be really hard if you feel like, you're, that everything that you do is sort of being rated, right? You got these grades that you get at the end of the first semester, and you are attributing so much to those grades. Law students attribute so much more to those grades than others do. And it's hard to kind of separate out the reality, and not lose track of yourself in law school. I mean, it requires some effort, and I think it requires some a culture of wellness where a law school and a legal employer says it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to say that you're not okay.
It's human.
It is okay, and in fact, it is part of your ethical duty and in order to maintain your competence to get the help that you need, so that you can, so you can be a successful law student, and so you can successfully serve clients. And so that's what's been needed for a long time. I mean, it's a hard nut to crack, as they say, because there's so many other objectives of, law school needs to, we need to be real about grades. We need to be able to say, there are certain jobs that just use grades as a cutoff. They just do. And so, if those jobs are, if that's really where you want to be, where you want to go, you're going to want to make sure you focus a great deal of attention on everything you need to do to make those grades. But the reality is, the number of those employers is small. The eye of that needle is very small.
Yeah.
And so there's never, the expectation that everyone's going to want to have those jobs. That isn't the case. The problem is being able to think as a law student about who am I, why am I here, what do I really want to do, and I might not know what I want to do now, but I know I'm here to learn that, and to do the best I can. But I can't risk losing myself in the process.
Right.
So many of our students actually come in, they have families, they have, they have jobs, they have other things that they need to do. For some students, it's a full-time job, but even then it's hard. Especially, we have students who are coming in, like I said, they're all accomplished. You're not in law school if you haven't achieved, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not going to put yourself here, right? But we all come with different experiences. So we have first generation law students, first generation, they were first generation college students. Some people who've never interacted with lawyers in their life, many who've never been in a law firm, or don't really know the mores and the habits of law. But and for those students, there's commonly a belief, again, not justified.
Yeah.
If you actually look at the facts, that everyone else sort of knows. Everyone else knows the answers to those questions. And that it's so stress inducing to just always think that you don't know the answer. I mean, there's a lot. You come into law school to learn, and especially with a law school like ours, where we have a mentor program that puts students out into the field to learn these sort of, these customs of lawyers, to learn how to communicate with lawyers. All of that is part of the development, but it's sadly it can be very stress-inducing.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, that college is here to not lose yourself, to almost discover yourself in a way. And I got my master's in biomechanics up at NDSU, and I broke in grad school. I had a breakdown, and I would imagine that happens to some students along the way too. It just kind of, it blows my mind. Sorry, I'm trying to organize my thoughts. There's like 15 going on in my head right now. But with the stress and the pressure of these students, do you think a lot of them go into law knowing what it is, like you were saying, or do you think they get there and they go, "Oh man, this isn't what I thought," and then do they just continue to stick it out because, like, is there a sense of like feeling like you failed if you realize that's not what you wanted to do there? And do you run into that very often? I think. So
on the first question, do they have a sense of what they're going to encounter when they get to law school?
Yeah.
I don't think so. Yeah. No. It's hard because it really is. It's different. It's just a very different environment. And so even those students who come where they have a family of lawyers, the lawyers can say, well, it's going to be tough and blah, blah, blah. Until you're here and are, sort of immersed in this environment, especially as 1L students with the Socratic dialogue method of learning.
Right.
You're not, until you do it, it's sort of like parenthood, maybe, until you do it.
Yeah, you just get thrown in.
You can read the books and people can tell you all the stories, but until you do it, you really don't have a sense of how it's going to actually impact your life.
Yeah.
And then, the second question was...
Well, it was, do people, do you run into students who accept that, oh, maybe this wasn't for me and it's easy for them to go, or they just kind of stick it out and have a miserable time in college?
Okay. Well, thanks for reminding me, because
Yeah, no worries. It was a terrible way I asked it the first time, so
oh, no.
gave me time to clarify it.
Well, part of this pressure cooker is that this is expensive. This is an expensive endeavor. And so, even if you come in with a scholarship, it's going to, be an expensive endeavor. And so I think it's really hard for students, even after they've invested even 1 year, to start thinking about, moving on to something else. Because it's just,
they're already on the road. They think, right? Like they're already on their journey in a way.
Yeah, I mean, that by itself makes it difficult. But also, I found that students tend to come to law school because they have a really good reason to be in law school. Not just because they think, saw it on TV and it looked like a great gig.
Yeah.
But because they're here for a reason. They are here because they've suffered an injustice, or they are aware of injustice. They want to be part of a solution to that. They have, they're here because they have been told and really do have skills that lend themselves very well to advocacy, and they want to do advocacy. For many, it's been their dream to come. For some, it's sort of even been kind of their obligation to come. I mean, I've seen that when I taught professional responsibility, I used to ask students to say, why did you come to law school? What did you hope to accomplish, and what do you hope to accomplish? And there are definitely some folks who, the expectation was that they would go on to law school. They would be the person in their family or whatever. So, so regardless kind of where you come from, there's expectations. But I'm just talking about your expectations. Then there's family expectations. You don't want to be letting other people down. You don't want to let yourself down. You don't want to give up your dream. And so I think once you're here, it's what you need to do is figure out how to manage this in a way that you don't lose track of yourself, that you do stay well, that you engage in affirmative wellness activities, and that you get the help that you need when you need it. And try to not listen to sort of the negative, check out the rumors, talk to, find folks that you can trust and ask about these questions. Do I need to get on law review? If I don't get on law review, does that end every possibility that I can go do what I wanted to do? So being able to maybe question some of the things that you hear about when it's about pathways, and right. Anything that ever suggests that if you don't have this, you can't have that. Ask a few more questions.
Yeah, it's very polarizing. Looking at it that way.
Well, and it's just aside. I think students, especially our students, they really do support each other, and so they're not necessarily kind of climbing over each other to get to the top, but the internal impact of these, the idea that you need to do this, and if you didn't make it on law review, that's a deal breaker. None of it is a deal breaker.
So what's law review? I know that might be a silly question, but
well, a law review is a competitive. Basically it's a journal that's published, student published, always supported by the law school. And we have a couple different. We have a law review and we have a journal of public policy. But the law journal has always, we call it, and other law schools, it's sort of their flagship publication. And so you want to get it. Law review is something that if you have it on your resume, there are certain employers that'll say, yep, they have the skill set we want. They have the kind of credentialing that we want. But at the same time, it's not a deal breaker for the vast number of jobs in the law. So it's again, there was some studies done by a guy whose name is Larry Krieger. He's a professor down in Florida. and he's done a number of studies with a psychologist. I think they're Krieger and Sheldon, if you ever want to take a look. But one of the things he did was a happiness study, which actually showed the inverse relationship between high grades, law review, big law job and lots of money, and happiness.
Wow.
And so, I mean, so much of what students come to believe, or at least hear during the process, just doesn't carry, for the long term, doesn't bring happiness.
Where do those myths come from usually? Or are they just out there?
Well, back to the beginning. I mean, we law schools are these pools of incredibly accomplished people.
Right.
And so there are accomplished people have always figured out what the rules are to succeed, right?
Right.
So to get A's in high school, you need to do this.
Yep.
But to get A's in college, you need to do this. And to get A's in law school, you need to do this. And then there's these things that you can read about in books like the book 1L about law review and realize, law review is something that would give me more options. And so as a overachiever, which all of them are, there's a natural aspiration to the things that you think are indicators of success. And, and are you successful? Yeah. I mean, our law review folks excellent writers? Yes. Do they get an amazing experience on how to run this publication and work with, other accomplished writers and, experts around the country? Absolutely. So there are definitely advantages to being able to do some of these things, but, our students who are in clinics, which most of our students are, we have amazing law clinics, lots of experiential opportunities. They're coming out also with skills. And so it's not like you do this if you want to get the skills and then otherwise you're not going to get them. It's just deciding how fit and what what you hope to accomplish.
Yeah. It reminds me of I was a professional pole vaulter for a bunch of years, and it was kind of you'd hear about these guys who you need to throw up after every single workout or you weren't pushing hard enough, right? It's almost the same idea. And then, in my ex-phys class, all that stuff, it was like, no, if you're throwing up after everyone, you're actually getting weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. And it really is. It's like that might have worked or didn't work for those guys. And their whole message might have been just push yourself harder, but if you do it too much, you could break. And some people need to push themselves less than others. And what I found was, and this has nothing to do with law, but it seems to help with the purpose. But when I was overtraining most of my career. And then when I stopped for like 2 years and retested myself and just did half of what I was doing, I was actually better than I was. And it was miserable training, which is why I quit being a professional pole vaulter. I didn't look forward to 4-hour workouts every day and always being tired and having to watch what I eat and all that stuff, when I could have been doing half, getting higher results and having more time to do what I liked. And that's kind of what it sounds like you're talking about, is like there's these ideas, and it sounds like what you're doing with your program is just helping rework those ideas to show what being successful is to that person, because it's different for everybody. Am I kind of on track there?
Well, and I don't know that our program is, I think it's an endeavor that the profession really needs to, make sure that wellness is a priority, that, that there's this whole range of wellness components, and working on your intellectual self is but one part of it, right? And excessiveness, I would guess, in any of them, eventually isn't going to be healthy. But to your analogy, that's exactly right on point to what many students find themselves doing, overstudying. there's probably some students who would say, well, there's no such thing as overstudying.
There's like a
And
point of
there's probably
diminishing
some
returns, right? Yeah, that's
right, but there are diminishing returns. And so,
Yeah.
and there's some students who feel like, well, because I don't come to by this naturally, I just need to keep studying. I need to bring my books with me everywhere I go. I can't stop studying. No, I can't take a break to go see my mentor. Even though it's an hour and you could just take a walk and go see your mentor for 15 minutes and maybe grab some nutrition on your way back or whatever. I mean, students can sometimes just get in this mode where they're just so, they're highly motivated, but then they also just have this insecurity. We end up hearing about, students feeling like, what are they? The imposter,
Oh yeah.
I
I've got
really,
that.
I just lucked out that I'm here. I'm not quite sure I really belong here, and I gotta do all this extra. When really you need to take those breaks. You need to make sure you've got the supports around you to really be successful in all you do. Because if you emerge from here with excellent grades, but you're not having a very good life, that didn't do you much good. On the happiness scale, you're not gonna do very well.
Yeah. So what kind of things do you maybe at St. Thomas and the profession as a whole, what are they doing to help? I know you said you had mental health week, but is there programs that people can come to if they feel like they need help, or do you have online services or something that people can check out to make sure they're doing okay?
So there's two questions there. One is, what is the profession doing and what resources are available? Right. And resources, we have great resources for law students here at St. Thomas. We have somebody he's a director of academic achievement, who happens to also have a degree in psychology, which is incredibly
perfect,
helpful. Yeah. But he's a go-to person when students are struggling or have questions about the academics as well as personal things. And so he's here in the building all the time. We also have a dedicated counselor from from the university's counseling and psychological services. We have somebody who's right here on the Minneapolis campus, who's really, I'd say 90% of her time is devoted to law students.
Wow.
And then we have a couple other amazing resources. But Lawyers Concern for Lawyers is an organization dedicated to helping law students, lawyers, and judges with wellness, mental health, chemical dependency, dealing with stress, dealing with life, the things that happen in life. And that's absolutely confidential. They have peer support, counseling. They have an arm, that has professional counselors that are available 24/7. So there's, and on a nationwide level, there are those lawyer assistance programs around the country. And so there's definitely help out there. And then that's on top of that, we actually have, especially here in Minnesota, we have places like Mayo, and I'll talk about the collaboration we have with Mayo. But Mayo has, top of the, state of the art, top of the line, wellness, mental health, physical health, available too. I mean, that's you have to have insurance for such things. Right. But here we are in Minnesota, the land of 10,000 treatment centers and excellent medical facilities. So in terms of resources, there's a lot available. And like I said, the lawyer assistance programs around the country are for lawyers, law students, and judges. And so there's definitely help and there's hope for lawyers. The challenge is reaching out, feeling like it's safe to reach out. I think there's a study done not too long ago of lawyers also with very similar results about lawyers needing help, lawyers having high rates of depression, anxiety, not quite as high as the law students, and then chemical misuse. But there's a similar fear that others will find out if you get help you need, and a fear that there might be other professional ramifications. And so you can have all the resources you want, but if you're not addressing the, sort of the stigma piece, you're not, we're not going to be as successful as we could. And we're going to lose people. We're going to lose lives.
Have you seen a change over the years, like with the stigma and people reaching out for is it going in a positive direction as you see?
I am an optimist. I think it is going in a positive direction, and I think the profession is going in a positive direction too. Because so for many years I've served on something that was called the Life in the Law Committee, and it always felt a little bit like we're kind of beating our heads against the wall. And because there wouldn't ever be anybody who'd suggest that these issues we're talking about are not important.
Right.
But many times they're sort of like, yeah, but they're not law. They're important. They're just as important as they are to cab drivers or whatever. We don't need to make them part of our education. Now across the country, at least in Minnesota, you can get credit for continuing education that is on quality of life, balance, wellness. That's a recent addition. That in many states, there's actually required education on the connection between, mental health, chemical health, and the practice of law. So there's been progress made, but that's an area that, we have to make the point and make it happen. There are many states that are really on top of things. So not only do they have a great lawyer assistance program, but their judiciary is really making sure that the bar examiners the bar examiners and the disciplinary authorities are truly doing things to make sure that that law students and lawyers are not be given these disincentives to get the help that they need.
Okay.
On the national level, we've just had in the last few years, they had a task force that was on lawyer well-being, and it was a task force that had folks from discipline, bar examiners, elsewhere in the profession, the judiciary, and basically they said what we need to do is create a culture of wellness in the profession. They identified the different stakeholders, whether they're law schools or employers, malpractice insurance carriers, just all these different components of the profession, and said, here's the problem. Here, for law schools, here are our recommendations for law schools. Here are our recommendations for professional liability carriers, all with the idea of encouraging, the fact that wellness has to be part of who we are as lawyers.
So how are they looking at as wellness as a whole? Is it going to get like mental health checkups? Is it physical? Is it, or like doing exercise? Is it work or nutrition? Is it all of the above? Like how are they looking at wellness as a whole in this?
It's all of the above. So
Okay.
I think the American Mental Health Association I think they have a chart that has 8 components of.
Okay, so they're following the American Mental Health Association.
Yeah, I think that's the one that the ABA adopted, and so it has spiritual. You're going to pull that out. You're going to pull that out of this. Spiritual, vocational, physical, mental. All of those components of who we are as human beings, all components of our wellness. And so they basically have said, we need to do something, and we need to be a lot more affirmative about creating a culture of wellness, tying it to competence, which is our number one. We have these rules of professional conduct, and rule 1.1 is competence.
Okay.
And so maintaining competence to be able to take care of other people, we need to take care of ourselves. And that's a message for a lot of us who've been hitting our head against the wall, it's kind of like, duh.
Yeah.
But to have it elevated to something that really is a competency, it's a skill, it's a need, is gives me hope. And we've had some, I think for law students, the reason that report, although it was created by the American Bar Association for the profession as a whole, one of the things that really can give me hope and give our law students hope is that they ask stakeholders to make a pledge, a wellness pledge to the ABA, that they would support as employers and as law schools, that they would support wellness, making sure that we were nurturing a culture of wellness. And law schools around the country have signed up, made that pledge. We were one of the first here at St. Thomas. Always proud of whatever we're doing here, but Dean Vischer got on that right away and made a pledge on our behalf to maintain this culture of wellness here at the law school. So those efforts that are being done around the country are going to bear some fruit as long as they're true. We're truly changing culture, because the only way to change the culture of lawyers tend to think that going out to events where there's alcohol is the way that you deal with your stress. Well, we know that's a whole lot of fun for those who aren't in recovery or have a problem. But it ignores the vast, other resources you have to be a well person, to deal with your stress and those sorts of things. So, so there's definitely some things that are going on here at St. Thomas that have always been. I mean, you were here a number of years ago before the pledge.
Yeah.
And we were having, our wellness week, and we had a bouncy castle so students could.
I forgot about the bouncy castle. I was in there probably more than I should have been.
Oh yeah. Some could sleep in it. Some could bounce in it. Most of them smiled in it.
Yeah.
And then, the event that you were involved in to sort of bring some happiness, some just, there's no competition, although it was sort of like who gets to hold on to Hamilton net. Right. Was the only competition going on there. But to really be able to experience joy in a setting, any setting, is just, it's precious, right? And so increasing the opportunities to have joy, but then, and to do the hard work, which is to say, we need to make time in our classes. We need to make sure that in professional responsibility, we are making the connection between, who you are as a professional and, and your wellness, how able you are to be able to take care of others.
Can we talk about the competency part a little bit? You said it's rule 1.1.
Yeah.
Right. So what happens if a lawyer isn't? I think that's a cool way to break the stigma in a way. Is I know in our society, and I know I have struggled with this too, is that it almost feels like if you want to be the hero of your story, you have to take some kind of a suffer to help somebody else. Like there's some form of like if you can't feel good about doing a good deed, and I feel like that's in our society a little bit. And sometimes helping yourself is part of that. Like if I want to help that person, I need to help myself. But there's this conflicting cultural idea that I can't feel good if I'm helping somebody else. There has to be some kind of like suffering behind that. Does that exist in your field, do you think, where, well, I shouldn't have to feel good. There have to be hard work, and this should be hard.
I don't know. I mean, we're at a mission-based institution here at St. Thomas, and so we tend to attract law students, like I said, who are here to effectuate change. And I would think that's generally true of most law students. And it was at Hamlin, and it was at Mitchell, that people are here to do good, and they don't have any hesitation to, in that there's no guilt involved or no feeling like you're not really doing something real.
So why do people stop helping themselves? I guess that's the question. Like where's the resistance there, do you think?
Um, my thought is just that, well, I suppose there's always some denial that goes on, right? There isn't actually anything wrong with me,
Right.
but
Yeah. Denial's always a big one.
yeah, but I think it's more, um, you know, you think you're the only one who's suffering in this way. You don't want to, you know, you don't you don't want to be the person who has, a mental health issue. Well, the reality is so many of us do, right?
Yeah, I've called it the skeleton that's in everyone's closet and no one wants to talk about. But
Right.
as soon as you show your skeleton, everyone's like, "Oh, mine looks like this too," and then everyone's pulling their skeleton out.
Right. Yeah. Well, we got skeletons, and we also, I think we're much better just generally at being able to make the connection, because everyone knows you're supposed to eat well, right? I mean, that you're going to be healthier if you eat well, and that you should get some exercise. But attending to your mental health is just, for whatever reason, i.e. stigma, it's just different. It's just different, because you wouldn't hesitate to say, I have a broken leg, right? Or, I have this condition or that condition, right? In fact, all the TV, on TV, all kinds of people are telling you what they have and don't have, right? And that's okay. But I think it's just hard around that stigma to, to deal with that. And then because you're afraid of the consequences, right? I think that's a bigger thing. And I think there's just in an airplane, they tell you to put on your own mask first before you help others.
Right.
People wouldn't think of that, right? I mean, the child is next to them. They need to take care of the child, right? Well, you can't take care of the child if you're gasping for oxygen, right?
Right.
And so I think that's actually just, being selfless comes with it ignoring your needs in a way. So
I get that example is perfect, because that's what people want to do first, is help the child before they help themselves. And that's what I was trying to touch on. And our society kind of has that idea of like, help others before you help yourself. And that's almost like, that's why I like that you're talking about this. It needs to be switched around, and shown that. And there's been so many good examples so far that that's where the competency lies. Like if you're running at 50% capacity, you're still running at 50% capacity trying to help somebody versus helping somebody at 100% capacity, And
right.
It's crazy. It's crazy that's taken so long, and that it's such a strong stream we're trying to go up,
Oh yeah. Well, you don't have time to take care of yourself, right? I have this to do. I can't. It would be nice. And in fact, I think many in the profession of law used to say, wouldn't it be nice if we were well? An acknowledgement we're not very well. But that's a nicety, right? We got to take care of our clients. We got stuff, we got to do. It would be good to be well. But now if the idea is that, you need to be well, or you're really not helping these other people.
Right.
Not helping yourself, you're not going to be effectual in helping others. So.
Is there a data or a way to measure like how well you're doing? Is there a way to put a number on that in law? I know that sounds that sounds hard to do as I'm asking the question, but I'm a number guy. So like,
how many nice cars in your driveway?
Yeah, right.
I think
in terms of how many people you're helping, or how I don't know. I don't know the profession as well as I would like to, but like how fast you can, get a result, or how many cases you can move forward. Is there a way to measure something like that based on how competent you are, and see if that number is going up or down versus how well you're taking care of yourself?
I don't know. I think wellness in the law is one of the least studied things. There's no money in it. We're lucky that we've had 2 major studies done in the last few years. I mean, that ABA study from a couple of years ago. It was the ABA Hazelden study. If you look it up, that was the first study that had been done in like 20 some years. I mean, the previous one, here in Minnesota had been done at the University of Minnesota had done one on law students. But there just isn't, there's not a whole lot of studying that goes on around that. But one of the things that I think is a optimistic sign is that, our bar association, and I think most around the country, actually keep track of the volunteer hours that lawyers put in.
Okay.
So we're not, as lawyers, we're not required to do pro bono work. We are encouraged to do that. There's actually a suggested number of hours per year that lawyers should do. But then there's these recognition programs that actually recognize those lawyers who go above and beyond in doing that. And so there's a celebration of that, of the pro bono. But there's just also, the law it's a service profession. I mean, like clergy, like medicine, you go to law school because you're going to be serving somebody else. So that, I think that's natural. Serving yourself just needs to be elevated a little bit more, as a in order to be able to truly serve at your best.
Oh, this is kind of maybe it's an impossible question, but if you had a magic wand, what would you do to the profession, like today? If you could just wave it around, what would you like to magically change?
That's a good one. I mean, it's hard. I think as close to a magic wand, I think the idea, a recognition that we need to change culture. What I would do, I think that's what we need. And I think the ABA task force that did that got it totally right. Their approach is reasonable. What we now need is for me or other people to wave their wands and make the change happen. Because there have been all kinds of studies, not just in this area, but others, about glass ceilings and about racial disparities in policing. These are not new concepts, right?
No, right.
We have this tendency to, we do the study, we identify the problem, identifying solutions. Sometimes we do that, but the implementation, we get kind of bogged down in the implementation. And I think, so my magic wand would just allow us to implement those recommendations and truly change the culture. The realistic part of it is there's certain aspects of what we do as lawyers that are kind of hard to change. Like, we do billable hours, and there's no denying that if you want to, make a lot of money in the law, you need to produce, right?
Right.
And so everything always needs to be kind of weighed, we need to think about the reality, because you can't have, a culture of wellness doesn't mean that we can all just work part-time. Well, we could if we wanted to,
right.
But the law firms wouldn't be able to function if, with people kind of on half-time the way they do now. There's a price to be paid. There's work that has to be done, and figuring out where is the balance. How do you take care of yourself in a way that you can be productive, be happy in what you're doing? Because lawyers aren't all happy, and be successful in every way that one can define success.
Right. How do you define success for yourself?
I think we should talk about practical things, like what are the wonderful things that St. Thomas is doing.
We can if you want.
we need to turn to that, because there's some pretty cool initiatives.
Yeah, let's do that.
At St. Thomas. But yeah, I think success is ultimately you need to make sure that you're taking care of who you need to be you, and to be the best you that you can be. And
So I asked that question because your term of success from we've talked a little bit before this. That's what you're doing with St. Thomas right now, is trying to help people be successcial, in their eyes. And so, yeah, I know it felt like maybe a left field question, but I love that question for the sheer fact that you are doing that in your job right now, or what you're doing. And every time I've talked to you, it just screams passion for these students that you're around all the time. And that bleeds off on me, and it like fills me up with like excitement too. So yeah, let's talk about some of the things.
Makes you want to go to law school, huh?
I think my school days are over. Grad school is enough for me. Right. But it definitely makes me want to like talk to people like you, and that's why I like doing this right now. But yeah, what kind of things are you doing, and is St. Thomas doing to help law students be successful at St. Thomas?
Okay. Well, one of the components of our wellness here is definitely a big component is our student organizations are very strong here at St. Thomas. And we have a student organization that's dedicated to wellness. It's called Wellness in Practice. Some students came to me a number of years ago because LCL had come and talked in their professional responsibility class, and this particular student was a 3L, and said, "I can't believe this is the first I've heard these stats. The stats that I gave you." Yeah. Of 2 to 3 times that of the general population on all these scales that we should be worried about.
Do you think they should know that before they get into law school, or is that
who's going to tell them that, Sean?
Or maybe day one, right, when they're already in law school?
Yeah. But well, I mean that's another question. But one of the things that the Life and Law Committee developed was something. It was actually a brochure. I know it's kind of old-fashioned these days, but it's called "Are You Fit to Practice?" And the idea was that we would get that out, get it through like the pre-law advisors and others, so that students had a chance to think about where they were, how they were doing, whether this is a good time to jump into law school or not, and to know that there are, that this environment can be stressful.
Yeah.
And it's been adopted, that brochure has been adopted around the country, mainly by lawyer assistance programs, because they don't have, they invest in wellness, wellness of lawyers and law students. It's really hard for an admissions office, for example, to say,
deter
all right,
people from coming to
give us 1,000 of these brochures and we'll get them right out.
Right.
I mean, but because I think you need to be, maybe that's a little too much in your face. But that's why the beauty of this, change the culture. And if you're making a pledge for wellness, to have a well culture, it's going to be reflected in all you do. And so it is going to be reflected in admissions as a positive, as a, we take seriously the wellness of our students.
Right.
And students need to know that being well, staying well, and getting the help that you need is part of who you need to be as a law student. And so that, that's one thing that, here at St. Thomas, we have a wellness page that's outward facing that essentially shows students that wellness is a part of what we do here at St. Thomas. It lets them know that there's, the individual I identified before, Scott Swanson, here in our environment, who supports law student wellness and is there to help students. We have the Wellness in Practice initiative, which is listed there too. But then we have an internal intranet that our students can access that has a lot of good information about wellness as well. And so resources wise, I think we've got some great resources for students.
And has that been there since you've been there, or when did all this the wellness side of it at St. Thomas start to be developed?
I don't think we had a wellness page. We had Scott Swanson, the director of academic achievement, he's always had a helping students page.
Yeah.
And
Cool.
so I think it kind of grew from there. And, things were added to that, like Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers and the ABA link and some other things. And our University of St. Thomas counselor, they've always had counseling at the university, but it was probably 4 years ago now that the university agreed to have a counselor here, and that came out of law students being willing to say, in response to a survey that Wellness in Practice did, say we need to have services available to us.
Okay.
And so that's something that I've seen come to fruition in the last few years. We've had Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers has somebody who goes to all the law schools and offers, he's not doing counseling, but he's doing triage. He's here to help students. Students say, I'm feeling this. Should I be worried? My friend is doing this. Can I help? Kind of doing triage. And so, all of those things have been sort of increasing. And I think one of the reasons is that these students decided we're going to have an organization. We don't want it to be third year that we finally find out about this. We really do want to have an organization that offers resources, has some peer support, they want to be there for their fellow students. And so I would credit the creation of that student organization as a pretty pivotal point in our law schools, kind of upping the ante a little bit.
Okay.
Having mental health week wasn't happening
Right.
before they came around, because it requires, law school isn't, we don't have all kinds of people running around who've got like extra time. We've got amazing amounts of passion. Everyone is here to help law students succeed, to help them sort of carry away their bag of skills, to live their passions here. But, we don't have a dean of students who would normally be the person in a law school who's sort of just dedicated to student wellness, because it's been distributed among a number of different people.
Okay.
Our director of academic achievement, et cetera. But having a group of students who have the interest, motivation, and the attention of students has been key. Because I think administration can say whatever they want, but I think there's a lot of credibility to what other students are saying. So,
especially your peers, yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like a lot of what we've been talking about is like, if the peer groups, if we were talking about that skeleton analogy that we were using before, that there's a skeleton in everyone's closet, if you have a group of peers who are doing the exact same thing you're doing, who are all talking about the same issues that they might be going through, it just sounds, to me, it sounds beautiful that if you can have these people, and I don't want to call them leadership roles, because like it almost feels equal, like that whole group, but allowing them to talk about it keeps the conversation going. And I know it's a slow process, but it feels like building a giant snowball, right? Someone's got to start it, and it's always harder at the beginning, but once it starts rolling, hopefully that culture you keep talking about just keeps growing, and that's why I really wanted to talk to you. And this is why this has been really great, because it sounds like you're building a giant snowball, so to say.
Well, and the snowball so when the dean made the wellness pledge, the snowball, picked up a little bit more, because the dean appointed a wellness committee. And it's now, this is the second year of the wellness committee, but it's a faculty, staff, and then there's a student representative on that as well. And, we're looking into, basically all of these things that we're talking about, how to make resources available, how best to communicate with students. But what I think one of the biggest things that has come out of this wellness committee is a collaboration with Mayo.
Okay.
And I wanted to make sure I talked about that, because that's sort of
Let's do that.
That's our kind of our crown jewel. It was put together last year. Dean Lisa Brabbit has forged a relationship with the folks at Mayo to really put together something that sounds an awful lot like a wellness, the pillars of wellness. So Mayo actually focuses on 4 pillars of wellness: mindset and mental health, nutrition, movement, and then recovery or resilience. And so they've built this program, and this is the Mayo Sports Performance Wellness Program. We're so fortunate that Mayo is downtown here, and that they have the sports performance clinic that, they treat professional athletes, but they also treat, just regular folks too. But we've collaborated with them to put together some programming around these 4 pillars. We have an incredible amount of expertise that comes out of Mayo. We have a couple doctors and 3 folks who are sports performance professionals. Professionals. That's a combination of the word professional and specialist.
It's too much.
Professionalist. But so having this amazing relationship with Mayo, students listen to other students, but students also, everyone knows what Mayo is. Everyone, in any country in the world knows what Mayo is. And so to have this collaboration and the visibility that it brings and the expertise that it brings is tremendous. And so they started by putting on these Wellness Wednesday presentations.
Okay.
Which not only has a nice ring to it, but they were incredibly good programming that students could come and learn things like, wellness hacks, what about sleep, your immune system, and those sorts of things, which were great before the pandemic. It's a little harder now. And then this pandemic tsunami hit,
right?
Which kind of changed things a little bit, and we're not hanging around in rooms together, eating our lunch and going to these programs. So that's a little more difficult, but those are still continuing. We're having virtual programs. There was also weekly, so those Wednesday programs happen about once a month. But then we also had these weekly things that were called Tuesday tune-ups that were sort of quick and easy. There was one about hydration, for example. That's just like, here's some facts, here's what you need to know, here's what we encourage you to do. A great way to sort of eat your lunch while you're watching this video and be able to, or watching this program, but be able to interact as well. And so
I bet these students love it because they're like, I'm already eating, I might as well take this to another level in a way, help myself out.
Well, it's a convenient way. We've always had, the half hour between noon and 12:30 have always been protected time where meetings aren't scheduled. So we've always had kind of a built-in sort of wellness incentive. Mm-hmm. But then, scheduling at 12:30 after folks have had their little, had a break, to actually focus on these wellness tips and have been incredibly helpful. But then there's also challenges. Last semester, we did a step challenge. And, we've talked about competition, right?
Yeah.
Law students and lawyers are very competitive. So if you set up a bike ride for law students and lawyers, even though it has nothing to do with finishing time, you're going to have a group of lawyers who are out,
right,
who want to be the first at the rest stops and who want to be the first to finish. Right?
Yeah.
And so, so appealing to that sort of healthy competition, we had the step challenge, and it was very well received. Faculty, staff, and students, walking, 10,000. The idea was that you're going to try to put in 10,000 steps a day.
Yeah. Okay.
And, there were groups that named themselves silly things and did it together. There were individuals who did it on their own. And it was just a really successful way to have people focus on their wellness every single day.
Right.
Because it's kind of hard to say I don't have time to do that when you signed up for it, and
It's already in the schedule. Yeah.
and we had an app, app on our phones that was telling us exactly where we were and where everybody else was. Um, it was great. And so there's another one of those coming. It's going to be launched shortly. There'll be another challenge. They got feedback on it, and they're going to, I'm sure, make it even more awesome. And so, aside from these programming pieces, the Wellness Wednesdays, the tune-up, because we now call it Tommy Tune-up. We don't do it on Tuesdays. We just do it weekly.
Okay.
But there's information that's coming out to students in a publication that students, faculty, and staff receive every Monday about wellness. That's new. We didn't have that going before we had a wellness committee. They hear about this Mayo, the Mayo programming. And then every week, in that publication that goes out on Mondays, all the resources in terms of, the counseling center, Scott Swanson, Chase Anderson, who is our LCL person. So we're really kind of, we're trying to figure out how do we best reach faculty, staff, and students, and make sure that we truly are integrating wellness into all that we do. And we have a committee that's keeping an eye on it, reporting to the dean. We report back to the ABA every year, actually.
Okay.
I mean, I think it provides much hope that we can do everything that we can to change the culture of the legal profession, one segment at a time. So here in the law school, we want our students to be well. We want them to be able to get the help that they need when they need it, and know that they're not going to be at any sort of a disadvantage for being well.
Yeah. Are you guys doing anything to measure like how many people are using the apps or opening the emails or something like that compared to maybe like what was going on in the past? If you can see that there is a trend that the culture is changing and growing, or is it just kind of noticing how many people are coming into the office? And
well, I think it's relying on how many people are coming into anyone's office. Isn't necessarily, I mean, it would be but one criteria, right? Because
right, exactly.
what we're doing is saying help is available in lots of different places. And we don't care which one you take advantage of, whichever one you're comfortable with. That limits our ability to sort of get stats, right, from that. But I know, we have an Instagram feed, we have and we have a Facebook feed. And, part of what we do these days is we are actually, we do wellness activities are being publicized in that way. So it's not just here in the law school, it's going out into a broader audience.
Okay.
We know that folks see those things, but, we don't have, can you tell if somebody opens emails? Probably. Do we pay attention? I don't know. But I think what we do rely on is, we're fairly small. I mean, we have, 460 students. We have, and then faculty and staff. I guess I don't know the numbers, 60, whatever.
Yeah.
We're not very big, but we can rely on, just kind of word of mouth, finding out, do students read this publication that we call the docket? Many do, many don't, which is why you have a multifaceted approach, and you try to make sure that you make it easy for them to find these things. So the wellness, the Tommy tune-up was at the bottom, at the top of the docket this week, right?
Okay.
And so you make it easy for people to see. You don't require them to do a lot of linking around. And you don't shove it at the bottom.
Right.
You want them to see it, or you make sure there's enough good stuff that they should keep on reading.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's not. I love that. Like it wasn't there the last time I talked to you, and I don't. It gives me hope. And Judy, I just want to say you're the best. every time I talk to you, I always leave refreshed. Something there's change. And before we go, can I just ask you one more question? And I know we're getting towards 90 minutes here.
Wow.
But from a stigma standpoint, what do you feel is the number one thing that maybe people can do, whether it's in the law profession or just anybody, to kind of help with the stigma?
Be willing to be vulnerable yourself and tell your story. And I saw 2 examples of this just last week. We have a publication that one of our local bar association puts out, the Hennepin County Lawyer, and there were 2 separate stories in it of lawyers. One was about balance, how this particular lawyer found balance, not just during the pandemic, but just in general, because we're billable hour people, right? And you get into the setting and you're always comparing, how much work you could accomplish versus how you would benefit by taking an hour off. And one of these articles was just basically did that analysis and ultimately concluded that that as much as she's an overachiever, that hour was better spent taking care of herself, which was just incredible.
Beautiful.
So for a student to actually read that, there might still be some folks who say, well, you got to get your billable hours in. But I think that was good. And then this other lawyer actually shared not just tips on what she did during a pandemic, not to, to go stir crazy in her house. So there were like these travel tips, but there was also her, she described her experience with getting mental health assistance by seeing a counselor. She provided some tips on choosing a counselor. These are not typical. These are not things that I've seen very often written by members of the profession, especially young lawyers. They're both newer lawyers, willing to tell their story. And I wrote to both of them. I sent emails to both of them and just said, thank you so much for sharing your story. You can't imagine what that means to the law student who's thinking, it's just me. It's, there's something wrong with me. And I really don't want to be telling anybody about that.
Right.
I want to keep that to myself. And so, for this lawyer to talk about, needing some assistance with her mental health and getting it, and her actual experience, you don't see that very much. And so that's what it takes. It takes being willing to share your story. And it shouldn't just be the folks who are in the lawyer assistance program, because they've always been doing it, right? Right. It should be, others who are just, telling their stories, so that we all know that, you're not the only one who feels this way. And there is help. There is hope.
That's perfect. I think you nailed it.
Oh, well, thank you. It is my passion. We didn't even talk about my program, which is the mentor program, but that's okay.
I'm so sorry. Is there any way, if people want to contact you, is there, are you on social media or anything like that? If people want to.
If people want to contact me, I'm pretty easy to find right here on the University of St. Thomas website.
Okay.
They can find me there.
I'll put it down in the show notes too, if people have any questions about the other things you're doing that's changing the conversation on mental health, which it is. And Judy, I just want to thank you again. This has been wonderful.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. And it's not my fight. I'm just I'm in here with others.
Oh, I love Judith Rush. She's the best. Guys, as always, if you feel like you are in a dark spot and need some help, head over to onewholelifemedia.com, and there's a link of tons of resources to help you get the help you need. And if you're still struggling to find the help you need, let me know, and I will do everything within my power to point you in the right direction. If you want to support this channel, also at onewholelifemedia.com, we have a Patreon, we have clothing, we have little mental health reminders, we have all sorts of stuff to help support this. And if you have another idea of how you would like to help with this project, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. As always with all these podcasts, links to the guests are in the description or the show notes below. And so check that out. This was a fun one. If you have any idea for any other guests for me, let me know. I'm all ears. I would love to hear from you. So, with that said, as always, life is meant to be experienced, and curiosity will get you there. I will see you in the next one.